after I confessed my love to my uncle Marius, a family friend. He took me to meet a girl in a wheelchair. Her name was Karen, and she was also his future partner. Marius said that Karen had lost her legs and her dreams while saving him, and he had to take responsibility for her. I didn't understand. Did one really have to marry the person to repay the favor of saving their life? He didn't answer my question. In my previous life, I didn't believe that Marius didn't love me, and I kept testing his bottom line, until he watched as his family servants broke my fingers one by one, and he didn't even frown when he heard my heart-wrenching screams. I completely lost all hope. Later, because my injuries were too severe, I couldn't undergo another surgery. Eventually, I became depressed and committed suicide by cutting my wrists. When I woke up again, I didn't hesitate to submit an application to be a doctor without borders. I gave up my position as the little niece in that family. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. When the application was approved, I finally let out a sigh of relief. My fingertips couldn't stop trembling, and my eyes turned red. But I didn't even notice it. No one knew that I had been reborn. I was 21 years old. At the moment before I was about to confess my love to Marius. That day, I was wearing the dress that he had spent a fortune customizing for me, and I had also booked the most luxurious hotel in City A. I invited many friends to witness the beginning of our love. Since I could remember, Marius had been by my side. My parents were doctors without borders, and their whereabouts were uncertain. I only met them a few times a year. Marius had accompanied me through almost the first half of my life, both the happy and the unhappy times. People in the circle had tacitly assumed that I was Marius's child bride. In my previous life, several of my close friends gave me a lot of ideas when they knew I was going to confess, making my face turn red. I was secretly looking forward to it in my heart, but no one expected that Marius would reject me. Just like in my previous life, Marius seemed to have already guessed what I was going to do. His brows furrowed slightly, and he rubbed his two fingers together as he was brewing the words to reject me. The emotions in his eyes were unclear. At that time, I thought that Marius was just worried that I was younger than him and couldn't distinguish between love and affection. So I smiled and said, "Uncle, I like you. When I see you, my heart beats faster involuntarily. When I can't see you, I miss you crazily. It's an emotion that I can't suppress no matter what. I'm very sure that my feelings for you are love." Others also joined in the teasing, and it finally ended in a hurry. And that day, I was still smiling, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Just as he was about to speak, I spoke first. "Uncle, the research project that I've been working on for a year was completed last week. I'm very happy, so I want to celebrate it." Marius was stunned in place. My friends also looked at each other in surprise. When they were about to speak, I gave them a cold glance. They then forced a smile and silently put the banner that said, promise her," that they were holding behind them. The confession ended without any result. After the gathering ended, Marius and his friend were smoking in the corridor. He leaned against the wall, and his well-defined fingers played with a golden embossed lighter. The flame flickered on and off. His friend smiled teasingly. "I thought Jennifer was going to confess her love to you today with this grand gesture. I didn't expect it to be a false alarm." Marius closed his eyes slightly, with a faint smile on his lips. "Don't randomly guess the thoughts of a young girl. I have no other feelings for Jennifer. I take care of her just because of the friendship between our families." His friend didn't believe it. "You're just blind to your own situation. Look at the way your little girl looks at you. Do you think we're stupid? If you were really innocent, why did you go and warn that little boy when he confessed to your little girl? You even claimed to be her boyfriend." Marius didn't say anything. I didn't listen anymore and retreated into the darkness. In my previous life, Marius was like this. His kindness to me had already crossed the line, but he just refused to admit it. When I got home, I submitted the application to be a doctor without borders. After my parents died in the war zone one after another, I wanted to carry on their will. It's just that in my previous life, it ended before I even had a chance to start. Fortunately, heaven took pity on me and gave me a chance to start over. I looked at the reporting time and then at the calendar beside me. I took out a pen and silently marked the reporting day. Coincidentally, that day was Marius's birthday. Suddenly, there was a knock on my door. It was Marius. He was used to knocking twice and then coming in. But this time, there was also a girl following behind him. The girl was in a wheelchair, wearing a white dress. There was no trace of blood on her face, and there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes. She looked extremely delicate. "Jennifer, come here," he said to me. I didn't move. I just glanced at the girl. She was Karen. I originally thought that without my confession, Marius wouldn't bring her in front of me. But unexpectedly, the things that were supposed to happen still happened. "Jennifer." Marius frowned and called me again. Seeing my indifferent expression, Karen lowered her eyes and said softly, "Marius, it's okay. It's normal for Miss Jennifer not to like me when we first meet. If she minds my presence, I can just go back to the villa in the suburbs. I've lost my legs and can't go anywhere. It doesn't matter where I stay. I don't have to live here." As she spoke, there were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She was like a delicate little flower, pretending to be strong. Marius's frown deepened, and there was a hint of disappointment in his gaze as he looked at me. "Jennifer, Uncle, you can arrange for whoever you want to live in the villa. In fact, you don't have to tell me about it. You're the master of this house." My voice was very calm, giving no hint of my emotions, but to Marius's ears, it was full of thorns. He thought I was throwing a tantrum. "Jennifer, you don't have to talk to me in this tone. I brought Karen to meet you today because I want you to meet your little aunt. She lost her legs saving me in the earthquake 3 years ago. I need to take responsibility for her. If you still want to stay in this house properly, put away your temper as a young lady and don't cause trouble for Karen." He gave me a warning look. I wanted to speak, but in the end, I remained silent. In fact, I couldn't really blame him. I had an extreme possessive desire for Marius. Since I was a child, I hoped that I was the only one in his eyes, and the only female companion by his side should be me. So over the years, he had no romantic scandals. Even if there were women who dared to try to get close to him, I would deal with them. All his partiality and exceptions were for me. So in my previous life, when he was going to marry Karen, I broke down. Did one really have to marry the person to repay the favor of saving their life? I thought about it for a long, long time. I even lost my life over it. Still couldn't figure it out. Now I've figured it out. Some things just can't be understood. Karen was going to stay in the room next to Marius's, which used to be mine. Before Marius brought me to live here, he secretly asked his friends for advice, and then he drew the blueprints himself and renovated the whole room. He turned it into a beautiful pink princess room. He also bought many limited edition dolls and placed them on my bedside. He raised me like a princess, from childhood to adulthood. He always said, "As long as it's something Jennifer likes and can make Jennifer happy, I will do it." I hope our Jennifer grows up healthy and happy, and becomes a happy little princess. At that time, his eyes were full of tender and affectionate love. It made me fall for him, but he remained an outsider throughout. In the room, Marius leaned against the doorframe. After giving me a cold look, he said, "I asked Mama Carol to tidy up the guest room on the first floor. You can stay on the first floor for now." I didn't say anything. I just folded my clothes and put them in the suitcase. Then, when I got up and was about to pick up the doll on the bedside out of habit, my hand stopped. Marius's gaze also shifted to the doll. Seeing that I didn't move for a long time, he said, "I'll bring the doll down for you later." I took a deep breath, retracted my gaze, and forced a smile. "No need. Give it to my little aunt. I don't want Marius anymore. What are a few dolls compared to that? It was true love before, but now it's nothing." "Jennifer, are you still angry with me?" Marius asked coldly. Why should I be angry with you, Uncle? I asked back. You have your own life. Now you have someone you like and someone you want to protect. I should be happy for you, shouldn't I? Marius's eyes darkened. His thin lips opened and closed, but he couldn't make a sound. When I pulled my suitcase and left, Karen was not far outside the door. There was a hint of mockery in her gaze as she looked at me. Just like in my previous life, she pretended to be so innocent on the surface, but in fact, she targeted me everywhere. She would cry at the slightest disagreement. The tears of the weak always easily win sympathy. Miss Jennifer, I'm sorry to have wronged you. If it weren't for my inconvenience, Marius wouldn't have done this. My hand gripping the handle of the suitcase tightened. When I wanted to bypass her and leave directly, she suddenly grabbed my wrist. I instinctively shook it off. Karen's wheelchair fell uncontrollably down the stairs, and a scream rang out. The servants in the villa all rushed over. Marius, save me, save me. Hearing this, Marius ran out of the room in a panic, pushed me aside who was in the way, and threw himself forward to grab the armrest, preventing the wheelchair from rolling further down. I stood there in a daze, my throat tightening. It wasn't me. The wheelchair was stuck on the stairs, and several servants blocked the way. Marius quickly picked up Karen in his arms and walked up to me. The servants also carried the wheelchair over cooperatively. Marius, you scared me to death. I thought I was going to die. Her eyes were all red, and the fear in her eyes was real. After calming Karen down, Marius looked at me angrily. Jennifer, are you crazy? If something really happened to Karen, you would be suspected of murder. Do you know that? I bit my lower lip, full of grievances, and my nose felt sour. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. She suddenly grabbed my hand, and I just shook it off. Hearing this, Karen said with a sobbing voice, It's my fault. Marius, don't blame Miss Jennifer. I didn't lock the wheelchair properly. That's why this happened. Karen, you don't have to speak for Jennifer anymore, Marius said coldly. I know what kind of temper she has. Over the years, all the women who got close to me were driven away by her with her little tricks. I couldn't help laughing, with tears in the corners of my eyes. So you don't believe me, Uncle? Do you deserve my trust? He retorted. Yes, I don't deserve it. Only Karen deserves it. You believe whatever she says. After saying that, I pulled my suitcase and was about to leave, but Marius asked the servants to stop me. He said, Apologize. I looked back at Marius in disbelief. He repeated, Karen has been wronged for no reason. You should apologize. What if I don't? I asked with tears in my eyes. I thought that when facing such a scene again, I could face it calmly, but I still overestimated myself. When all the previous partiality turned into a sharp sword stabbing at me, it really hurt. You know my methods, Marius said coldly. He looked at the servants behind me. The servants glanced at each other, just as they were about to step forward and press my shoulders. I let out a self-deprecating sneer. I let go of the handle of the suitcase and bent over to apologize to Karen. I was wrong about what happened today. I shouldn't have shaken off your hand when you grabbed me. I almost made you fall. I'm sorry. Karen was stunned for 2 seconds, and Marius's expression also became serious. After I stood up, I looked at Marius. Uncle, is that okay? If it's not okay, I can even kneel, I said. Marius's eyes were filled with complex emotions, and in the end, he didn't say anything. I pulled my suitcase and went downstairs. As soon as I reached the first floor, Mama Carol said, Sir might be in a bad mood today. Miss, don't be angry with Sir. Over the years, we've all seen how much Sir dotes on you. As she spoke up for Marius, she tried to take the suitcase for me. I just smiled. In the past, when I quarreled with Marius, Mama Carol would always act as a peacemaker. Over the years, Mama Carol was still the same, but Marius and I could never go back to the way we were before. Miss, aren't you going to the guest room? She asked me in surprise. I shook my head. No, but Sir, Please tell Uncle for me that I'm grateful for his care in the past. I won't bother him anymore in the future. This life. This is where it ends. I don't want to suffer the pain of my previous life again. After Marius settled Karen down, he called Mama Carol and asked to check the surveillance footage from the corridor just now. When Mama Carol came, she hesitated to speak. In fact, he believed Jennifer. Over the years, although she would use small tricks to make those women stay away from him, but they were all harmless. She knew what the bottom line was. So when he saw from the surveillance that it was Karen who took the initiative to provoke Jennifer, he didn't react much. He owed Karen his life. As long as Karen didn't go too far, he could let her do anything. I knew Miss wouldn't hurt anyone, Mama Carol said indignantly. Marius rubbed his forehead. Make some of Jennifer's favorite dishes tonight. But Miss has already left. Marius was stunned. What? Miss asked me to tell you that she's grateful for your care in the past, and she won't bother you anymore in the future. Mama Carol said it in a somewhat sarcastic tone. Marius didn't blame her either. He just let out a tired sigh. Jennifer has such a temper. She can't stand the slightest bit of grievance. After he asked Mama Carol to go out and prepare dinner, he called Jennifer, but Jennifer didn't answer. The more he called, the more irritable he became. Finally, he threw his phone on the desk. In fact, since half a month ago, from the day when he originally thought Jennifer was going to confess to him, he would always feel inexplicably irritable, especially when he met Jennifer's eyes and always heard her speak in that indifferent tone. He always felt that something was getting out of his control. Now, it seemed that all the answers were about to be revealed. I wasn't surprised that Marius could find me. There were still 7 days until the reporting date. After leaving the villa, I went back to my own home. Marius stood outside the courtyard, with the red tip of his cigarette glowing and fading between his fingers, his brows furrowed tightly. I had just come back from the hospital and saw him. You're off work. I nodded and didn't say anything more. The surroundings suddenly fell into a deathly silence. He was waiting for me to continue speaking, but in fact, I had nothing more to say, until his phone rang. It was a call from Karen. Marius didn't avoid me and directly swiped to answer the call. Her weak sobbing voice came from the other end. Marius, I had a nightmare. I dreamed of that earthquake, and I dreamed that I couldn't save you. Could you come back and accompany me? She asked cautiously, but Marius instinctively looked at me. By then, it was already dark. I lowered my eyes to look at the elongated shadow on the ground, with an indifferent expression. After a long while, I heard him say, I'll be back right away. The call ended. Marius instinctively reached out to hold my hand. I frowned and avoided it, and his movement froze. When he looked at me, there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. He probably forgot. In the past, our intimacy was because I regarded him as the person I loved. Uncle, you have your little aunt now. We shouldn't cross the line anymore. I said it in a calm tone. Marius let out a sneer, retracted his hand, and pretended to be calm as he put it in his pocket. I know you can't accept my relationship with Karen for a while, but it doesn't matter. I can wait until you can accept it before getting engaged to her. For now, just get to know and adapt to each other. I didn't say anything and remained silent. In my previous life, ever since Karen appeared, Marius and I never had a day when we could talk properly. We would quarrel as soon as we met. He would scold me for being shameless and falling in love with my own uncle. He would also say that I couldn't distinguish between family affection and love. He pushed me away step by step, but I faced it head-on like a fortress, even though I was bruised all over by all those vicious words. My friends, his friends, they all tried to persuade me. Marius doesn't like you. Why don't you believe it? The one he likes is Karen. Every time I would cry and say that it wasn't true, that Marius loved me. On the day I turned 18 and came of age, he thought I was asleep and secretly kissed me. He said that he would marry me when I turned 22. I always firmly believed that Marius only wanted to marry Karen because he wanted to repay her for saving his life. Until that day. The Maxwell family wanted to take me away in the bar. I had no contact with the Maxwell family and didn't understand why they wanted to capture me. Until the second son of the Maxwell family said that the old master of the Maxwell family had a cerebral infarction. I suddenly understood. Marius once said that the people from the Maxwell family had looked for me. He said that the Maxwell family had done some dirty things, and he told me to keep my distance from them. But I never knew that the Maxwell family was looking for me because of the old master of the Maxwell family. They sincerely invited me to perform an operation. I cried and refused to leave, my pale knuckles clutching tightly at the hem of Marius's clothes. But he coldly said, "Let go." He watched indifferently as I was dragged away, as my fingers were broken one by one in front of him. He listened to my heart-wrenching screams, and he didn't even frown. At that moment, I finally confirmed that Marius didn't love me. "What are you thinking about?" Marius's voice sounded. It pulled me back to reality. "You've had enough of your tantrums these days. Let's just forget about what happened last time. Jennifer, you're not a child anymore." After saying that, he opened the door of the passenger seat and looked at me. I stood there without moving, forcing a smile on my face. I suddenly wanted to ask Marius from my previous life. Why could he watch so heartlessly as I was tortured, as I became depressed and eventually died of depression? Even if he didn't love me, I was still the little niece he had raised since I was a child. "Uncle, what you said that day was right. Over the years, any woman who appeared by your side would be driven away by my little tricks. So, for the safety of my little aunt, I won't go back." Marius frowned. "Jennifer, Uncle, you know that I like you, right?" I calmly interrupted Marius. His pupils suddenly shrank. Over the years, I had never hidden my feelings. As long as one wasn't blind, they could tell. I believe Marius knew it too. "Jennifer." He looked at me with an embarrassing expression. "Don't worry, Uncle. I won't anymore in the future. I was naive before and mistook family affection for love, making a lot of jokes. Now I'm stopping the loss in time. I hope Uncle can forgive me." After saying that, I smiled again. But Marius stood there stunned, as if he couldn't understand the words I just said. He opened his mouth, about to speak. The phone in his pocket rang again. It was particularly harsh in the silent night, ringing one after another. He seemed to still be in a daze, but I had already taken 2 steps back and turned to leave. Marius looked at Jennifer's gradually blurring back and suddenly felt a sense of bewilderment. He habitually took out the cigarette case from his pocket and lit a cigarette. Only after taking a deep drag did he come back to his senses a little. He looked up. The light in the room on the second floor of the villa had already been turned on, and Jennifer's figure was reflected on the curtain. 3 years ago, Jennifer was 18 years old, on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony. He was drunk and stumbled into Jennifer's room, looking at the sleeping girl. In a moment of drunkenness, he crossed the line for the first time and kissed Jennifer. The girl was like having a sweet dream, with a smile on her lips. His family and the Norman family were old friends. He was 7 years older than Jennifer, since childhood. Although he had acquiesced in Jennifer's crossing the line, he had always reminded her not to confuse family affection with love, and not to mistake dependence for love. Jennifer didn't love him, and neither did he. He let Jennifer regard herself as his child bride. Firstly, to drive away those audacious young men, and secondly, to reduce the romantic scandals around him. One Jennifer was already enough to give him a headache. But when he saw similar cases around him that didn't end well, he backed down. A relationship that had changed its nature couldn't go back to the beginning, so it was better not to start at all. After he sobered up, he went on a business trip to Hong Kong City the next day. He just didn't expect to encounter an earthquake. He survived and was saved by a girl of his own age. The girl was a dancer. Because of him, she lost her legs and her dreams. Guilt and self-blame lingered in his heart. With his financial resources, it wasn't difficult to support one more girl. He had been supporting her for 3 years. Except for his assistant. No one knew about this. There was no other reason. He was afraid that Jennifer would make a fuss and that she would cause trouble for Karen. This time, he brought Karen back to City A. Firstly, to fulfill his promise to marry her, and secondly, because he knew that Jennifer was going to confess to him. He wanted Jennifer to know when to give up. They shouldn't have crossed the line in the first place, and they had no future together. But now, Jennifer had given up. Yet he started to regret it. When Marius returned to the villa, Karen was sitting in the living room waiting for him. She was wearing thin clothes. The night in City A was extremely cold. After waiting all night, her hands were already freezing cold. "Why didn't you go back to your room?" Marius frowned and asked. Karen pursed her lips and lowered her eyes to look at her phone. "I called you many times, but you didn't answer. I was really worried about you." Karen. Marius walked to one side of the sofa and sat down. Looking straight at Karen, there was no trace of warmth in his eyes. She looked up. "Jennifer was raised by me. She has been with me all these years. Her temper was also spoiled by me. When you decided to be with me 3 years ago, I already told you about this. I owe you my life. You can ask me to repay you in any way, but you must never touch Jennifer." As he spoke, Karen's eyes instantly turned red. She looked at Marius with a wronged expression. "Marius, do you suspect that I hurt Miss Jennifer?" Marius didn't say much. He only left one sentence. "For Jennifer's safety. There are many surveillance cameras in the villa." Karen stood there stunned and didn't react for a long time. She thought that Marius had clearly sided with her that day and believed her. She didn't expect that her little tricks had already been seen through. After Marius went upstairs, he didn't go back to his own room. Instead, he went to Jennifer's previous room. After Karen moved in, everything in Jennifer's room had changed. Those dolls that Jennifer once cherished had been put away, and the beautiful and lovely decorations had been replaced with simple ornaments. "Mama Carol." Marius called Mama Carol in. Mama Carol came over quickly. Seeing Marius sitting at the desk, she asked, "Sir, what's the matter?" He was about to speak when his gaze accidentally fell on the calendar in the gap of the desk. He bent down and picked it up. When he saw that the number 28 on the calendar was circled with a black marker pen, he was stunned for a moment. Mama Carol, with sharp eyes, also saw it. "Isn't that your birthday?" "Sir, I knew Miss couldn't really be angry with you." "Sir." Hearing this, the corners of Marius's mouth curled up involuntarily, and his thumb rubbed against the calendar. After a moment of silence, he put the calendar back in place. He said in a slightly cheerful tone, "Renovate the guest room downstairs according to this layout. Let Karen live on the first floor. After this room is tidied up, make it look like Jennifer's original room. I'll go pick her up in a few days." Mama Carol smiled and agreed, and Karen, who was just at the door of the room, suddenly turned pale. There were still 5 days until the reporting date. My handover work was basically completed. I just didn't expect that Karen would come to the hospital specifically to find me. In just a few days, she had become more like a broken beauty. "Is there something you want from me?" I asked her after putting away the medical record in my hand. Karen was sitting in a wheelchair, and the disgust in her eyes was fully exposed without any disguise. She looked at me. "Jennifer, Marius and I are about to get engaged. Could you please stay away from Marius? Is being a mistress who interferes in other people's relationships the way your family teaches you?" My hand holding the pen paused, and I raised my eyes to look at the woman in front of me, a sneer on my lips. "Miss Fong, you'd better watch your mouth." "Watch my mouth. You should also do things cleanly." "Jennifer, don't think I don't know. Everyone knows that you like Marius. You moved out of the Lee family's villa just to play hard to get. I'm telling you, Marius doesn't like you. He will never like you in this lifetime. He can't like his own little niece." Karen became more and more excited as she spoke. I couldn't help but let out a sneer. In my previous life, I hardly ever spent time alone with Karen. I knew she wasn't a good person. She was just like me, willing to do whatever it took for the person she loved. The calculations in her eyes and the tricks she played were things I had already gotten tired of in my previous life. But at that time, I forgot. Only when one is about to lose something will they desperately try every means to hold on to it. In my previous life, with just a few words of provocation from her, even though I fought with her until I was bruised all over, Marius remained unmoved. But in this life, I haven't done anything, yet it made Marius enjoy it. These days, Marius would send me messages from time to time. He told me that my room was still reserved for me. It was exactly the same as before. Nothing had changed. Just like when I left. And just like before. He would order afternoon tea for me without fail. Do you think Marius loves me? No, he doesn't. I also know that there are surveillance cameras in the villa. Given Marius's character, he wouldn't not check. But he didn't react after checking. It can only mean that he acquiesced in the fact that Karen bullied me. The current changes are just because he's not used to my leaving. That's all. After a long silence, I said, I can't like him anymore either. Karen was suddenly taken aback, and her originally excited emotions gradually calmed down. What did you say? I admit that Marius was very good in the past. Since I was a child, whenever I was wronged, he would stand up for me. He was afraid that I would cry and that I would be unhappy. Except for my parents, he was the best person to me in the world. So it was only natural for me to fall in love with him. But that day, when he saw me crying and still forced me to apologize to you, I stopped liking him. Karen seemed a bit dazed, looking at me with red eyes. Just because of this, I nodded. Just because of this. If the person I like is willing to let me cry and be wronged, then he's not the person worthy of my love. Before Karen left that day, she asked me again, no matter what Marius does, you won't like him anymore, right? I replied, yes, even if he were to die for me, I wouldn't like him anymore. The night before the reporting day, when I was about to board the plane, Marius sent me a message. I'll come to pick you up later. I didn't reply. It still showed that he was typing, but there was no follow-up for a long time. When I was about to put away my phone, Marius's voice call popped up. His voice sounded somewhat relaxed and cheerful. Jennifer, I'll come to pick you up later. There might be some traffic congestion. I didn't answer. He was indeed on the road. The honking of horns on the road came through. At this time, the boarding announcement sounded again. The breathing on the other end clearly paused. After being stunned for 2 seconds, he asked softly, Jennifer, are you at the airport? Yeah. Why are you at the airport? Are you going on a business trip? Why didn't you tell me? Did you forget that tomorrow is my uncle? I interrupted Marius's words in a flat tone, and he fell silent. I added, I'm going to follow the path my parents took. I'm not sure when I'll be back. Over the years, thank you, uncle, for taking care of me. After being reborn, I thought about taking revenge on Marius. I thought about making him taste the pain of having his fingers broken. I also thought about dragging those who hurt me to die together. But my life is so long. Why should I limit myself to love, hate, and grudges? Marius was truly sincere in treating me well in the past. Let's just consider it even. So now, I neither love nor hate him. Why? Why is it so sudden? After a long while, he asked me. I didn't answer. Then he said, Jennifer, if it's because of Karen, I can explain. I can make her leave. But you can't leave. His tone was urgent, and the honking of the horn in the car was also very harsh. Jennifer, can you wait for me? Wait for me. I'll be there soon. No, it's too late. I smiled softly and then hung up the phone. After turning off my phone, the haze that had been pressing on my heart finally dissipated. Finally, everything came to an end. Marius looked at the phone that had been hung up and kept dialing back. In the end, he only heard the cold mechanical voice. Jennifer had turned off her phone. At this moment, he was more sober than ever. Jennifer really didn't want him anymore. When he realized this fact,
with those cold eyes, he was afraid that he would never see a trace of love in Jennifer's eyes again. He regretted it after Jennifer's first suicide attempt. But he also knew that they could never go back. Jennifer died at the age of 25. And he finally didn't marry Karen. Even though Karen threatened him with her life, he remained indifferent. He insisted on marrying Jennifer, even though everyone was scolding him. He's so shameless. He drove his own little niece to death and still wants to marry her. He didn't turn back. Their wedding was grand, but there were no guests. He held Jennifer's ashes and completed the wedding. Finally, he committed suicide at the wedding. 3 months later, when Marius found me, I was taken aback for a moment. I had just come out of the ward and looked up to see him. He had lost a lot of weight. The suit that used to fit him well couldn't even hold up now. And he was skinny. He forced a smile on his pale face. I frowned slightly and kept my distance from him. "How have you been recently?" He greeted me awkwardly. I nodded. I had heard more or less about what happened to Marius. On the day I went abroad, he had a car accident. After waking up from the accident, he wanted to send Karen back to Hong Kong City and terminated his engagement with Karen. Karen didn't agree and made a big scene with him. Marius still didn't back down. Karen was so angry that she stole the Lee family's business secrets and sold them to 2 or 3 of his competitors. Overnight, he was attacked from both sides. The Lee family's stock price fluctuated. The capital chain broke. And the projects were suspended. It took him 3 months of working around the clock to barely stabilize the situation. Karen was sued by him and sentenced to 5 years in prison. "When are you planning to go back to City A?" he asked again, his tone cautious. I smiled and said, "I'm not going back." He was taken aback. "Why? You're home, Uncle. You've forgotten. I don't have a home in City A anymore. After my parents died, Marius was my only relative. But later, Marius didn't want me either. So, whether in my previous life or this life, I don't have a home anymore." Marius still wanted to say something, but I didn't listen anymore. I hurried into the operating room with the stretcher that had just come in. 5 hours had passed when I came out. I thought he should have left long ago. Unexpectedly, Marius was still standing there, persistently waiting for me. The emotions in his eyes were obscure and difficult to understand. I didn't understand, nor did I know what he wanted to do, until he followed me to the downstairs of the dormitory and asked me, "Did it hurt a lot when your fingers were broken?" Suddenly, I stopped in my tracks, and my 5 fingers subconsciously clenched. He looked at my back, and his voice was faintly nasal. I said, "Why did my Jennifer suddenly stop liking me?" "I'm sorry, Jennifer. I was wrong. I thought I didn't love you. But I..." He choked up halfway through his words. He covered his eyes, and tears spilled out from between his fingers. His shoulders kept trembling. It was as if he was in extreme pain. I was just too scared. Scared that if we started, we wouldn't have a good ending. Scared that in the end, we wouldn't have any relationship at all. I thought that Karen's appearance would just break your thoughts of me. I didn't expect it to end up like this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I made you suffer so much and be so brave for so many years. The more he said, the more painful he became. He carefully approached me slowly. When he tried to hold my hand, I avoided it and then turned back to look at Marius. There's no need to dwell on it. Is there? I have a new life. And Marius will have one too in the future. It's just that we won't have any more intersections. Uncle, people always have to move forward. After saying that, the last glimmer of light in Marius's eyes was completely extinguished. Jennifer. He smiled bitterly. I'm sorry. Goodbye, Uncle. After Jennifer said the last word, she turned around and left without hesitation. Marius habitually took out the cigarette case from his pocket. His hands were trembling as he took out a cigarette and tried to light it. But the lighter just wouldn't work. The wind on the border was very strong, and the sand blew into his eyes, making him unable to stop the tears from falling. If he had been brave once and been as brave as Jennifer without considering the consequences, would there not be such an ending? Marius seemed to have already guessed what I was going to do. If they couldn't reach the end, it meant there was no fate between them. But he didn't even want to pay the cost of making a mistake. After Jennifer returned to the dormitory, she walked to the balcony. Coincidentally, he looked up, and she seemed to sense his gaze. She lowered her head. When their eyes met, she smiled calmly, put away all the clothes, and then closed the balcony door again. Her movements were smooth, without the slightest bit of reluctance. At this moment, He truly realized that he had been completely blacklisted by Jennifer. She wouldn't be attracted to him anymore. Thinking of this, he vomited a large pool of blood and fainted downstairs in her dormitory. Later, the next time I heard news about Marius was 3 years later. He had lung cancer, in the late stage. On his deathbed, he hoped that I could go and see him one last time. Looking at my fully scheduled surgeries, I regretfully refused. A friend said, before he died, Marius notarized all his property and put it under your name. He was truly infatuated with you. Why did you end up like this? I just smiled. At that time, I also wanted to ask why we ended up like this. Thinking about it now, none of it matters anymore. People have their own destinies when they are alive, and the same goes for when they die. The end.